Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Live Feature Rant. Today we have Coffee, Tea, and PvP up in the house here. We've got Danny up in the upper left corner, returning guest Dygz in the upper right here, and of course Adam over on screen left down low here next to me, wearing a very recognizable hat if you notice. So... Welcome, guys. Man, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all of you, and Happy New Year to everyone out there in chat. I hope you all have had an awesome time here.
No, it's been a few weeks.
It has. It's the 17th was our last episode, so,
And since then, so much has happened.
Yeah.
I actually got to meet you in person. Apparently, I'm sharing space with Dygz. I'm here on the West Coast now. And, yeah, it's been a crazy couple of weeks now that the holidays are over,
Yep. It's good stuff. How about you guys up top there? How's the holidays and the New Year's and all that been for you?
Been great for me. Playing a lot of Landmarks.
Yeah, it's been a good time, really good time. Lots of people showing up in the game. We got all the people coming in for vacation, so a lot of excitement, a lot of like traffic in the game. It's really good to see so many people playing Landmark that after such a low spell before that patch.
Yeah, I mean it's understandable because if you weren't a builder and you really didn't like the harvesting stuff, there really wasn't much for you until this big content update. And it definitely was a content update. They were definitely right to call it that because, as they said, it definitely added more content to the game than we already had. So, here's the Forge Light engine, here's like the textures and materials, and then here's, all the content we had before. Now, here's this giant content package that just got dropped on top of it. That's, pretty much didn't double the size of the game, but it immensely more than by an exponential scale increase the amount of actual stuff we can do. It really did finally tie together a lot of the systems and get everything into a place where we can finally start seeing where the game is going to go forward from, rather than, building features and, well, here's some weapons. You can smack each other around a little bit, but, that's about it. So we've got a lot going with that stuff. And, today we're going to be, as we do on every episode, kind of talking about a little bit of everything. But in particular, the focus today is going to be combat and, fighting in the world. That's something that we didn't really have before. We didn't have PvE, and PvP was this weird thing that used to be like dual trinket bunny hopping, and now there's, they added 10 armors and a little bit more specificity, but we ultimately have a lot more going with it now. We have 7 weapons, we have 30 armors, we have lots, 15 or something trinkets?
Yeah, no, it's there's a lot more content, but it's a lot like as if they had a broken up music box, right? And they just sort of took all the pieces and they dumped it on their workbench. And that's what we've got right now. I mean, we've got this really nice music box, and some of the pieces are working great, and some of them aren't. And you can see what they're doing with it because it's in a state where they're testing the game. But those pieces, some of them, they need to be repaired a little bit before it's going to work and turn into this beautiful thing that we're all looking forward to enjoying. And that's kind of how the combat is right now, where we can see it, we can touch it, and we're all excited because now we have these pieces in front of us, and we can actually see what this might become. But we're so far from having that beautiful thing that they're going to eventually have to create for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but that is the thing, is that they've dumped the pieces. We get to play with them early, move around with them, get to play around with the nuts and bolts, and they didn't really balance anything. So, I mean, we still have to wait for all the polish to come in. But it's just fun getting your hands on and being able to...
Yeah, it's now is the time they want you to break it. Of course, it's not polished. They want to make sure that you see what you guys come up and do with it, because you guys are always, stretching and bending what the game can do. So, coming up with combinations they don't think of.
For sure.
And we do. We break it all the time.
we break it so much that sometimes they have to come and tell us to stop, like Felgon did with the claim full of landmines a ways back. That was
It's
that was pretty funny. Yeah, so and we've been seeing amazing stuff like the linking and triggering stuff. We've been seeing amazing stuff out of that. I haven't seen as many PvP arenas and combat applications with it yet. And honestly, it's still the only thing I can think of with that stuff is Pinball Brawl and the fact that even before linking and triggering, we had that. But now, amazing things are going to be really possible, and it's just a matter of people really going and trying them out and setting them up.
absolutely, and you're right. Like when these builders start getting creative with what they can do with those linking and triggering things, it's going to be pretty amazing. I've seen people where you walk up and where it used to just be a hallway, now it's a door that opens for you because they have like the area triggers, and they have other people where like they have a tombstones or something, and you walk up and the ghosts start coming out of the graveyard, or like you respawn and the ghosts start coming up. So they have a lot of stuff that people are getting creative with. It's important that the builders remember that the lighting is still a big deal when you're talking about making an arena where people can fight right now and really enjoy it. Because if you put in lots of light sources, you're going to have the same issues that people were having before, where it's going to slow down, it's going to make it so laggy, it's not fun. But you can also use occlusion now, which was a really big patch that we got last fall. So if you put the lights behind stuff, sometimes you can get away with putting in more lights that you normally wouldn't have been able to do.
Well, it's specifically the spotlights that the occlusion works with. Everything else is basically an area light that kind of ignores a lot of the geometry and a lot of the objects. It's mostly the spotlights. Those are the ones that you'll actually see shining light on glass and water and stuff, versus the area lights. You'll just see the highlight off of it, and it'll be illuminated, but it won't actually cast that light upon it. It won't actually look like it's being lit up with that color. So that's one of the things that you can, really do a lot with, especially because, there are the different colors of them, having different phases of the battle represented in different colors. Like when the battle starts, maybe there's a trigger that, the lights are green everywhere, and then as the battle goes on, it switches to yellow when there's a minute left, and maybe red when there's 15 seconds left or something. Or another way could be using the spotlights for the capture points. If someone's in an area trying to capture a spot, the area lights up red so everyone else can see, oh crap, someone's taking it over.
Right, and even those emitters could do some really amazing stuff. I mean, if there's a difference between having something that lags people out all the time and something that intentionally blinds someone. So you could have like a hallway where, if you walk down it, you were temporarily blinded. There's different stuff that people can do. I just think we're barely scratching the surface with what some of these amazing builders are going to be making for people. And keep in mind that sometimes you're not really making a PvP arena, but you want to have a place that you're building so you can see, hey, is this going to be a good combat idea? So like if I'm making something that I want people to fight in and EQ next, you guys can build it, and you can call, you can say, hey guys, I built this thing, and I don't really want to make it an arena, but I want people to be able to fight in it and have a good time with monsters. Can you check it out and tell me, was this going to be a fun place to fight? Is it too tight, too wide? They gave you some idea of, what type of dimensions they're looking for, but then when you actually start putting things inside of those hallways, they can be really nice to have somebody come in and say, hey, come in here and just try to kill each other for a little while so I can see if this will be a fun place to fight monsters, Because right now the monsters aren't cooperating to test your claims for you.
Yeah, they've been asked nicely to stay off the nice renter's property. Otherwise, I guess the anti-monster laws come into effect or something. I don't know. Well, eventually,
that's not working for some people.
Anti-monster laws?
I don't know.
Anti-monster law, monster immigration, ISIS
Yeah,
the ICE monster police.
Some people have monsters pretty close to them. I hear that some people are loading into claims and getting taken out by chompers nearby. So some of them are pretty close, apparently. I haven't experienced that, but that's pretty funny.
I can tell you exactly why that's happening. If I've got a claim that I use the little mountaintop here to kind of prop it up, but it's mostly over empty space, that empty space, it's fair game for trees to grow, it's fair game for monsters to roam, because it's not an actual claim there. So they can spawn there. I have seen wisps and other things do that. I have yet to see someone try, but I bet you could probably train a wisp to go over the top of a building or a structure and then try to maybe pull it down from there. That seems like a lot of effort, though.
Yeah.
It'd be probably more worthwhile to wait for them
Still.
to give us the game mastering tool so that we can make our own decisions for what the mobs do, because that's going to be nice, is we're not just plopping down mobs. It could be either like the mob spawners like you would see in Minecraft or those sorts of games, or it could be a completely different thing where you have just a lever you can flip and stuff happens, and one of those things could be having mobs appear, or if logic is also involved with that, being able to do a check if there aren't at least 3 goblins that spawned from this specific location, spawn the appropriate amount to get it back up to 3. Stuff like that.
Yeah, and Sony's no stranger to letting players design their own dungeons. I mean, they did it in EQ2. They've done it for EverQuest 1, and then some of the stuff that people make is just amazing. It's better than what the devs make. So it's going to be exciting to see what people really do get to put together once they've got the tools to do it.
Yeah, and this is just beginning linking and triggering. It's not even the advanced stuff that they're going to be focused on coming up. That's just, people are already doing amazing stuff. I don't know why people can't make a train. Can't they make that train to go through that sci-fi build?
No.
Yeah,
You
that
can't.
was spectacular. Why not? I mean, if they can make the building blow up, why can't they make the train move?
Okay, so I can explain all of what's going on there. That isn't actually a train. It's just a set of lights that are animated there. To actually move a mass over a distance, we don't have the tools for. We don't have the ability to set paths and endpoints and stuff like that.
Gotcha. I
You
see.
could maybe make a glass mover platform kind of do a little bit of that process, but that's not going to look like a train. So it's something that's really, really limited right now. But once we get the ability, and we were talking about this over the break, when we do eventually get the ability to put voxels into meshes and then use those to create our own props and potentially our own vehicles and equipment and other things, that's
Gotcha.
really going to allow us to do something like that, to actually make a train that goes along a track and explodes when it hits the building. And he sounded real excited. He said that, and this is the part that I was wondering about and I'm really excited about. Once something has been converted to a mesh, they have an intelligent system that it can be rescaled and have the texture rescale intelligently with it, so it won't look like a piece of crap when you scale it down 1/10 or 10 times the size. The textures will scale appropriately and redraw the appropriate quality and size, so we won't have things that look bad because you had to make the part this, here's the camera. You don't have to make the part this big and then shrink it down this tiny because it's just part of a chair, and it's going to look, all the textures are going to look warped because it uses a larger texture shrunk down. That's going to be really nice. Those are going to be some amazing features, and I believe that's also the basis for vehicles, which I don't know about you guys, but combat with vehicles is probably going to be the best thing. That's probably like the thing that I'm going to be doing in Landmark. I'm just going to be like making vehicles and battling people and then making videos and like poking fun at PlanetSide 2 players. Ha ha, I built this tank and fought people with it. What are you doing?
Are you secretly the guy who keeps typing mounts into the chat box during the Landmark live show?
No.
Mounts!
No.
Mounts!
I don't honestly. I don't even want mounts. I want the voxel mesh vehicle construction. I don't need a
cool.
horse. I need a buggy with.
I'm going to build a Hawkman rocket cycle. That's
There you
the day
go.
I look forward to.
Absolutely.
I don't need a magical unicorn with rainbows on the side of it. I don't need that.
Yeah.
I don't need
They
I
wanna
don't
put
need
it
to be
in.
able to ride Pop-Tart Cat. No, not at all.
Actually, I would probably be able to build a pretty good Pop-Tart cat with linking or with the voxel mesh stuff. I mean, it's basically just using the Loomis site and then, the little trail particle effect. Good to go. Yeah, so, Dygz, haven't heard from you in a little bit here. Any thoughts, any stuff that you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I would have spoken up if I were ready, but no, it's just good stuff. I think I was focusing on chat.
Gotcha. Yes, Nyancat, that's right, Oil. By the way, Oil's the one who made that awesome Juggernaut ship that has
Nice.
amazing work in it. And medbay,
Fantastic.
that'll kill you. I think the medbay is actually an organ harvester. So, yeah, don't get injured there. Oh, man.
So I don't want to hijack your show, but they actually said a couple things during Landmark Live about combat that were very, very interesting to me. If you want to talk about that, or if you want to keep talking about Linker and triggering,
You know what? No, this would definitely be a great idea to switch over. And unfortunately, I was doing a little bit of setup and burrito consumption and stuff during the Landmark Live, so I might have missed all of the details. So definitely lead it off. You're the one who knows on this one, so go for it.
Go for it. Yeah, don't worry about it.
So one of the things that was really interesting is they seem to make a couple shifts in the show. The first shift that they were talking about was they're talking about how they're designing EverQuest Next so that you're going to get boosts that are going to allow you to be stronger, like permanent boosts, like he was mentioning in Zelda. And it sounded like originally when they were pitching the idea that people were going to be just as strong as a player who'd been playing for a very long time, right when you come out of character creation. That you have more horizontal progression in the sense that you have more options. The further along, the more developed your character was, but that you wouldn't have raw stats. And as soon as you start talking about giving people more hit points, as soon as you start talking about giving people more health for more progression, that's exactly the kind of stuff that strays away from horizontal progression. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like, oh my god, the sky is falling, freak out, because it might just be a very almost insignificant amount of stats that they're talking about. But that was something that he did mention specifically that seemed very interesting. That and it sounded like, maybe I misunderstood him, but that he was talking about like that might even be gating you from going deeper into the levels and adventuring in those deeper levels, whether or not you had those boosts before you went down there. What do you guys think?
Well, we were setting up too, so we didn't watch the whole show, because they're talking about adding that stuff into Landmark as well. There's something somewhere, I think on the blueprint, where it mentions at some point we'll be able to get stuff that will permanently boost our health and armor through achievements, I think. But for EQ Next, I mean, they've always talked about the tiers of progression. That's vertical progression. It's just not as steep as it is in most games. And they've always said, the direct quote is, in general, you're going to want to be tier 3 if you're in a tier 3 zone. So there's some progression going on there, and it's significant vertical progression. It's just not steep vertical progression. So it's not going to be the difference between 100 and 1.
Yeah, the steep comment is, you're dead on with that. Like, yeah, because there has to be a learning curve for the player too. And I think I said this the last time we all got together and Dygz was on the show, that it's part of the gameplay these days. That's why games don't come with manuals anymore more often than not, is they're showing you through the design, through the monster AI and all of that, hey, here's how you play the game. Okay, now that you've kind of mastered these 2, 3, or 4 things, now we're going to up the ante on you. We're going to throw a harder thing at you with more advanced AI, and now you're going to have to add new tools to your toolkit. And, by giving some sort of progression there, it keeps you from, in this case, running down to tier 5 and grabbing all the good loot and skipping the first, the progression level of learning the game. That's how I'm seeing it. That I'm not bothered by it at all, because players need some sort of guidance. The game, the way it's been for a while, has not given guidance, has not shown the players here's and granted there hasn't been anything to fight, but that's why people didn't stick around very long. So by doing that, it gives the general public, the general player, needs goals. No matter how much the outlier voices cry, we need change, and we know that the general populace tends to be sheeple and I need something that resembles what I already understand and know.
Yeah, I don't know if they need it, though. I mean, for example, take a look at PlanetSide 1. I'm mentioning this because, as most of you probably know, Dave Georgeson, he was
PlanetSide 1 is
one
a
of the major
first-person
developers
shooter?
for that game.
Yeah.
And it was a first-person shooter,
RPG.
but it was a very it had horizontal progression. And when they first marketed it, they actually marketed it as like a first-person shooter / MMO hybrid. But in the end, it was really very much like a first-person shooter. But it did have a very interesting system of character progression that was much more advanced than what you're seeing in Call of Duty these days, or even in a game like Borderlands, where
Even in
we're
PlanetSide
basically
2, as far as I'm concerned.
even PlanetSide 2. I mean, they definitely took a departure from what PlanetSide 1 has in the character progression. I mean, what was beautiful about that game is that you could start off right off the bat, and you had you could be anything you wanted in the game. You could be the guy who flew a jet. You could be the guy who drove a tank. You could be the guy who walked around in a big armor. You could be a sniper. You could be an assault guy, right?
The hacker who gets you through your doors and takes over bases quicker.
Exactly. You could be the sneaky guy. So you could be any of those classes. But really, the more you progressed in the game, the more things you could do. So there was that advancement where, okay, now you're not just this, you're this and that, or you can switch and you can change your loadout a little bit more, and you had more variation the more you were able to progress. So, there are ways to give people progression as they go along in the game without necessarily having that verticality. The question is, how do you gate those levels, like you were saying, to stop somebody who just joined the game, aside from player skill and knowledge, of course, from just jumping down to level 5 and with their newbie gear saying, I just killed the dragon and I beat the game.
Well, but the difference here is that you're talking about an FPS versus an RPG, and what makes an RPG is different than what makes an FPS. So just because something works great for an FPS doesn't mean that that's the foundation of what makes an RPG. So that's really what we're talking about, is what kind of game are we making? Is it an RPG or is it a first-person shooter? That's the delimitation. And then you have to go into how much vertical progression is important, or what kinds of progression is important, because progression is the foundation of an RPG, going through the hero's journey of starting off, not with any abilities and making that character stronger. That's the hero's journey. That's the foundation of an RPG. That's not the same thing for an FPS.
We're not heroes. We're adventurers. This isn't a traditional RPG. This isn't a theme park RPG. This is a sandbox
It depends
RPG.
on whether we're talking about Landmark or EverQuest Next.
Let's just keep the focus on Landmark for the moment, then.
Hang on, I do have to interject before we move on. I just want to point out that Comer says that Phantasy Star 1 and Star Wars Galaxy's character progression were the best I've ever seen in games.
That's
so
PlanetSide 1, not Phantasy Star 1.
Whatever.
Phantasy Star 1 had...
Drink, you noob!
Simple progression to it. Well, no, I'm trying to think, because I did play like a hell of a lot. But
you're right, PlanetSide 1.
One of the things actually that made...
Since we brought it up, Star Wars Galaxies, I agree, and I think this is what Comer was saying, was that the skill point in the mix and matching of your character was kind of different, and it was very... it was steep in that your XP you were grinding was ridiculous, but you could go in any direction you really wanted to. It wasn't forcing you that way. But they did, during the flip in the game design, go to a very standard, here's 100 levels, here's your progression wheel, here's your, we took all this choice that we thought was a brilliant design idea, and the general public rejected. They're like, hey, we got to bring it back down to simple. And it went from one extreme to the other extreme. I think the happy medium is in the middle, but I think Dygz is really, really, really right about what he was saying, in that, an RPG I want to deep dive in on. You know what I mean? I think that's why Skyrim's so popular, because everyone can just get lost in the minutia of building their character and exploring the world, versus the players who want to play Counter-Strike and Call of Duty and all two different gameplay, two very different kinds of players. And I think that they learned that with PlanetSide. You know, they realize, oh wait, these are shooter people, not really MMO folks, more than anything else. And so they've obviously moved a lot of the only thing it really has in common with an MMO is that it's a shared persistent world. Really.
Well, you know, I mean, you can look at that, but then how would you explain the success of all the Elder Scrolls games, which have been around for decades? And they have the very same type of system where you're action combat, and where you do have a different... I mean, the thing is that they have a progression system that is very RPG in the sense that as you progress, you get stronger, you hit harder, you take less damage, and you get that stat advantage. And that's something that's very hard to code into an MMO. There's ways of doing it. I don't know if any of you... I'm using other games as examples.
Which part is hard to code into?
The gating of the abilities giving you more power, being stronger as you become more developed as an adventurer, is hard to create into a game where there's true horizontal progression. But it can be done. If you looked at the Final Fantasy or Realm Reborn, there were mechanics in that game where basically you had to move the right way at the right time or you died. And your gear wasn't the only thing. Gear did play a big part of that game, but you know, there are mechanics, there are ways that they can do it where you have to gain that knowledge and learn how to do the fight. And just having the gear or just having the stats isn't going to do it. But you know, these guys, most of us have talked to these devs. They're very smart. They're very intelligent people. It's not their first time at the rodeo. And I think that they're going to be surprising us with whatever they bring to the table.
Sorry, I was cheating and showing some Dygz here, something on my side. I apologize. Good news may have just come my way that I was hoping to go out in the middle of the show. But no, I agree. And I think we're getting a little sidetracked here. We're now just kind of debating differences between, you know, different genres of games.
Well, actually,
Landmark is something completely progression. In Landmark is really a unique, different thing, and this is I love the community, and I've been very impressed with the quality of people and how, you know, generally speaking and all of that. But it's a very fractured community at the same time as to what people are really expecting out of the game.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things, and actually Phantasy Star was one of the things that made me think about it, is that there's going to be a lot of different ways to progress. It's more than just, you know, your character and your stats and your gear. I mean, there can be a lot of variation in that too. But let's say, you know, if pets are going to be a thing, then your pet and its progression and how you synergize your abilities with its abilities. Potentially the vehicle progression too. That could be another sort of thing that initially you can only make a little trike with a little machine gun on it, and then later on you can build up into making a badass battle tank that's like an entire claim large, and it just mows down all the terrain in front of it to get from point A to point B. Or a land burrowing machine could be an attachment that you can get later on, but you have to get down to tier 3 and defeat some mechanical thing that you sometimes find in order to actually unlock that ability. I could see a lot of that stuff. Weapons and armor and progression for mods and stuff. I could see something where all the items that we get, the base version of it has 5 mods that are built in, and the more you progress through the tiers, the different levels of mod you actually get to change out for different abilities. So you would be able to, if you've only gotten through tier 1, you can only change the first mod on the item to be something slightly different. Then once you've gotten a little further, you can change out the first 2 mods all the way down. Once you're finally all the way to the furthest level of depth, it's not that you're getting more power necessarily by changing out the mods, but you're able to tune your gear to the very finest specificity of what you're doing and your build and what you're doing with your friends. So that way, it's not more powerful, it's just been horizontally kind of tweaked in tune to be the best fit for what you're doing. I think that's going to be a big part of the progression, is kind of the unlocking of access to make those kind of modifications. But, you know, Terraria does come to mind, and the idea that, you know, gaining health out in the world it's really only a PvE stat, to be honest, because when you're on somebody's build or you're in PvP or whatever, that could use a completely different health bar than when you're out in the world fighting mobs and monsters. So when you're actually in a PvP encounter with someone, it uses your health relative to your gear, and your gear might even have some limitations on it too, unless it's just a free, open, do whatever sort of PvP arena. Or there could even be other sorts of things where it's an arena where one person gets 10 times the normal health and everyone has to try to kill them. It could be fun stuff.
That would be kind of fun. That would be awesome. That would be awesome if you could play the boss.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be really kind of cool.
And that, once again,
Very
could be
awesome.
another thing to actually have to progress into, that you have to win 100 matches, doesn't matter where, and then you unlock the ability to be the boss.
And you're right that there is a difference there, and I think Sony has seen that they need to have a different combat system for PvE and PvP recently, with even EverQuest 2, where they went in, they reworked the entire combat system, where they changed everything for the people who were interested in PvP to try to improve it, because they realized that what's fun in PvE is not necessarily fun in PvP. And in PvE, you want to feel that hero, like the heroic feeling where you walk into a room and there's a bunch of monsters there, and there's like 3 or 4 creatures and they're all trying to kill you, and you just, you wipe them all out because you're the hero. Well, in PvP, if you're wiping out 3 or 4 other players, then those are real people who are kind of like, well, that guy sucks. I didn't stand a chance against that guy. But I want to mention something that you talked a little bit about, where you said they were fractured with the community, what people are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I think is a really big problem with the community, that the people don't seem to understand that we all need each other. People aren't necessarily a PvP player or a PvE player or a builder. Like, we're all tied together, because the success of Landmark, and I'm not just talking about Next now, I'm talking about Landmark itself, is a combination of all these people coming together to bring something to the game that everybody can enjoy. Like, what we do in PvP sucks without the awesome builders making fun places to fight. And the builders can make the most beautiful things ever, but if you don't have people to fight in it, it's just going to be like art, like a statue that you're going to have in your room and you can look at, and you're never going to see anyone having fun with what you created.
Well, you don't need PvP for that. You can just do that PvE.
Well, then you need PvE players to go in and have fun.
You stop trying to pick the fight. You stop trying to pick the fight PvP versus PVE.
But
I'm just saying.
I do think he's making a good point. Yeah.
But
the point is, you need people to play, but you don't need PvP people to play. You don't need PvP people to play. PvE players will play on them, and PvP players will play on them depending on what the person builds.
But your game is going to get more resources. Go ahead, sorry.
Now I have a question, because I don't actually know this. Like, Dygz, do you not want PvP available in Landmark at all? Are you against that idea?
No, I'm just saying not everything is PvP. I mean, the talk keeps coming up that it's PvP, and I'm saying it's also PvE. You don't need
I got
PvE
you. No, I
to do
agree.
it.
I
It's
agree.
also
But I think we may have stepped on his point a little bit, that he was, because obviously I get Coffee Tea and PvP is kind of into PvP. If you don't know, I'm much more of a PvE explore the world kind of guy. I very much tend to avoid PvP in general. If it's friends playing Team Fortress, I'm down to jump in and be a target dummy. But otherwise, I'm kind of generally not into it. But I do agree with your point that it is a system that is going to be interconnected. It just does seem sometimes, and you're not, this isn't directed at you, but it does seem often the PvP players tend to start getting their chests all puffed up, and they get to be a little bit of the louder voices, and often this game's about this, not that. That happens a lot, and so I think it's easy to kind of, go back and forth and turn it back into, my game, your game. So.
See, but that's the problem with an MMO, is that you have to realize that this is not an FPS game. It's an MMO, and the more things you have for more people, the more successful your game is going to be. You can take a look at World of Warcraft, which is it's just this epic creation that, of course, has been so successful. But it brings something to the table for everyone. There's people who play that game for PvP, and they love it, and they have a great time. But then those same people will go out and raid, and they have a different system for each thing. They have it for both people, and it makes your game more likely to endure, so that there's going to be people still playing it 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And it also makes it so that you get more people, because people are constantly cycling in these games. So the more attention your game gets, the more fresh people it comes to. There's definitely crossover there. There's room for us all to be friends and work together.
I just want to point out, too, while I'm busy pooping on different play styles, the hardcore raiders are equally as bad as the Care Bears and the PvPers, and you know what I mean? When we take it to extremes, we're all crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. In general, builders... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, one thing I was thinking about last night as to why it's never going to be an FPS or why it's going to be something that's heavily resisted. So in PlanetSide 2, they had to do this funny thing because they did a funny thing. And that funny thing that they had to do a funny thing about was where your first-person projection of a projectile goes versus where it actually comes out of your gun and goes on the server are not exactly precise. So they had a lot of problems where your gun looks like it's over the wall, but when you fire, you pull the trigger, the bullet hits the wall instead of going past it like it should. And there were a lot of situations, or your crosshair was, something way in the distance, and your cannon turret's firing that way, but instead it hits the rock in front of you rather than, going to its destination, because they had the first person and third person aren't synced up. So essentially what they ended up doing was making it that they just kind of cheat it, and shots go from like top center mass regardless of where it actually looks like it comes out.
Totally an issue for Sony games 5 years ago. Same thing with Star Wars Galaxies. Hang on. All right.
Yeah.
It still exists.
It was the same thing. You
right
change
now
your clothes.
in Landmark.
You would change your clothes on your end. Hang on, I gotta take my drink. You would change your clothes on your end. You would look the way you want to look, and everybody else would still be seeing what you were wearing. You would have to actually in-game, get on a shuttle or insta-travel and then come back for the game to, reload you into the world the way you wanted to be drawn, It was the same thing with combat. The AI, the mobs would be shooting you through the ground while you couldn't shoot them through the ground. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the latency issues, I'm sure they've mastered them at this point.
Well, no, it's
I
actually...
haven't seen that kind of thing I haven't seen that kind of behavior in Landmark 2, I think, ever, since I've been playing.
It's actually not a latency issue. It's a collision and
detection?
Visualization thing. Yeah, because it's just like most games, the first-person perspective isn't actually synchronous with the third-person perspective. You don't actually, the way the character looks when they're running around with the gun and when they come up, with the sights to look at it. That's not the same model. That's not the same character that the third person sees. And unfortunately, for the sake of keeping things simple for everyone else, it was based on the third person. That's why I don't think they want to do first person, or they're resisting doing it as much as they can in Landmark, so that they just don't have to deal with those issues, because the problem becomes, tenfold an issue when you have to deal with procedural voxel terrain that can be dynamically different as opposed to a very static, unchanging terrain that you have in PlanetSide 2.
They actually have that problem right now with the game, where there's an issue with projectile generation for all the projectile weapons, where it looks like you're shooting over the wall, but it's actually impacting right on you. You'll notice it with the staff and with the bow, of course, where people will have a small edge on their claim, or you'll be in the caves, and it looks like you should be able to shoot over the object, but your shots will go right into it. And this is the type of thing that we, as combat guys, when we say, oh yeah, now we're testing this, we're trying to do this, it's so important to the builders, it's important to the PvE community, it's important to everybody, because if this is how it's going to be, then people need to know this when they're designing their claims. They find, they know, okay, my wall can be this high, but not this high, because the players are going to need to be able to shoot at creatures that are here underneath, or other people who are underneath, and I want to make sure that they can do that without having to jump or jump on this item. So it's stuff that we try to point out, we try to find it, and then we wait for the dev team to tell us something back. I mean, they said today that they're listening to us, even though they never tell us anything back, which is something that I really wish they would just once in a while just say, hey, thanks, yeah, we're working on that, we don't know how to fix it, but don't worry, or something like that. Just because when something's like that for a while, you say, should I tell the builder about this? Should I not tell the builders about this? Is it an issue or not? And sometimes we just don't know.
You know, that just makes me think of all the crenellated walls that we've seen for the Dark Elves, for the Karens, well, not much for the Karens, but Dark Elves and I guess a little bit of the Ogres, where you've got, those little tooth-like marks along the way for the archers to come up and shoot down through. And how many of those are actually going to be functional and valid by the time we're actually fighting out from them versus which ones are, not going to have the right height and proportions, and you have to kind of kick over a few voxels before you can actually stand there and fire down at stuff. That's
Yeah, I mean, it's something that that's totally viable. That maybe they just have to make it lower, and people can totally make it work. And our builders, I'm sure, if that's the way it's got to be, and they say, hey, look, this is how it's going to be, and it's just going to be broken like this. Deal with it. They'll make it work. These guys, these people who make things are so talented that they'll change their builds or do whatever. But it would be something that people might want to know when they're making their submissions, when they're doing their creations, that hey, my landmark build is going to need it. Whether you're sci-fi or you are trying to do something for EverQuest Next, you just want to build something that's going to endure in the game. There's stuff that people would like to know. That hopefully if they communicate just a little bit with us, they can tell us these are bugs, these are not bugs. And I think sometimes they just don't know, and that's why they don't tell us. But hopefully we hear it just a little bit more from them in the future.
I mean, to that point, I wish they would move their focus now that we've got that and other stuff in the game besides building. I wish they would move their Studio C off update week landmark lives to talk about other stuff than just building, because we can do that on a workshop show. We visit people's claims on the workshop show. It'd be nice to talk about some other stuff besides just that, or make it a combat focused building stuff. Go on people's builds that are designed for combat and talk about that stuff. But I'd rather have more talk about combat and monsters and stuff like that on the off updates, since we've got a workshop show that already focuses on building.
Well, it focuses on building, but it's a different sort of focus. I would actually say the workshop show isn't a building show so much as it's an EverQuest Next show. And it just so happens that building is the only really major way that we can interface with EverQuest Next as players right now. I'm sure as Storybricks and those kind of interactions come in, we'll start to see more stuff with that going in as we see more gameplay tools and stuff that potentially could be used for things we'll see in EverQuest Next. We'll probably be seeing a lot more of that with the workshop. Now, that doesn't mean that the workshop isn't also being used for the builds and stuff, like the Ruins team up stuff that was being handled through the workshop show. So it isn't entirely EverQuest Next. But when I think about when they tried to make the delineation between Landmark Live as Landmark, EverQuest Next is specifically in the workshop, and putting them on 2 separate days to further kind of make that separation. That's why I feel like it probably still does make sense to do it on the Studio C on the off week shows. But
what is it?
The building focus, like you were talking about. But
why? Why can't they do linking and triggering on the workshop show too, and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and let us talk about other stuff like combat and monsters on the off weeks of the.
Well, like this week, for example, they're going into all the ogre voting and judging stuff, which is probably going to take well over the hour that's allotted, and probably do another 2-hour episode.
Yeah, but that's still a week that we didn't get to talk very much about combat and monsters, right?
True.
I agree with Dygz that I was kind of hoping this week's show was going to be they do, because Dave Georgeson gets very excited about building. He likes showing off new tricks, all of that. They obviously like showcasing the player builds, but now that combat's in the game, it would have been nice if they had, shown players, here's what we're thinking, here's some examples of why we did this like this, and here's some tips you may not be aware of. I would have liked to have seen more of the focus on that, And again, it's an off week, so maybe, coming back from the holidays as someone who's just gone through a major move and is trying to get back on his feet, and going through the holidays and all of that, maybe they weren't quite ready to put on that show this week as they're trying to kind of collect their bearings after having a few weeks off. So who knows? But yeah, I kind of with Dygz. I think that at this point, well, you're right. I don't know. I'm torn because you're right. It is technically it's a next show, not a landmark show per se. I don't know. Whatever. But we definitely need more talk about the combat and the AI and the PvE now that it's in the game.
It feels like they're at the point where they probably would be justified in setting up one more show per week to kind of talk about some of the other stuff, whether it's a combat-focused show or it's linking and triggering. Honestly, I could see a kind of an inner working sort of show where it's like voxelmancy specifics, linking and triggering specifics, story bricks specifics, arena fine-tuning specifics, but not necessarily how to actually build one or make it look pretty. I could see that being a show that's separate from the Landmark Live show, which is specifically about updates and news, and the Workshop show, which is specifically about builds and focus towards EverQuest Next, which sometimes also gets into Landmark. It probably would be about time for them to start up another one, and if not now, then maybe a few weeks down the road when we start to see a lot more of those features, and there just isn't enough time in that 1 hour to talk about everything for Landmark Live every week.
I mean, and they don't even need to do a whole show. The truth is, it's just we've been months without seeing a combat guy come on live or answer anything or talk about what's going on with combat at all. People were still discussing on the forums, hey, what's the difference between Landmark combat and EverQuest Next combat? Are we getting the same thing? It's very confusing, and everybody is just theory crafting, which I mean it's what we're doing here. But everybody's just got these wild rumors and ideas of what it is. Nobody really knows because all our information is at best 6 months old from SOE Live. And unless you're buddy with a dev and you're getting them in trouble by letting out their secrets, most people don't really know what's going on with the EverQuest Next combat and how it applies to Landmark. Are we getting that? Are we getting something different still? I would settle for like 10 minutes of some combat guy just coming in and saying anything. Really, they could have, instead of doing as many show and tells as they did today, they could have just taken out one thing. And I know it's kind of sad because the stuff they're showing us is really cool, but they could have just taken one thing less and had somebody who knows something about combat or one of the combat guys come in and say, hey guys, look, we're doing this, we're doing that, be excited about this, and back to the show. Just the Sloan Sabbath, 5 minutes of 10 minutes of super entertainment for us people who want something else. Sorry for my newsroom reference. I hope you guys caught that.
No, it's quite all right.
You're right, and they definitely could have at least said a little bit about combat this week because it was a big portion that they added, and they really didn't talk about it at all. It seems like something they maybe wanted to wait on until Dave comes back because there might be some big announcement that they want to make or some more news that they want to give, but they want to check in with their director of development who is actually currently on his vacation. So he opted to stay around during the rest of the team's 2 weeks off for holidays and instead play with linking and triggering, but mostly find bugs and issues and problems and do thorough and detailed reports on them and other things that he felt needed to be changed about the game. So while he went on vacation and he's doing his family Christmas right now, finally, he definitely left the team with a lot of stuff to work with. But with that, I could see maybe being at a point where they don't want to go forward or they're waiting to hear back from him to go forward with more news and discussion about combat. That being said, they could have at least gone like a pull from the community, top 10 builds or favorite weapon from the community or something, and at least had like a little filler or something.
Yeah, I don't think they need just to have like drivel. It's just a little bit of something that's meaty, that's actually official. Because I'm not a big fan of like, I mean, we players, we talk amongst each other on your show. For example, this is the best place to get top 10 builds. You could have a top 10 combat build or a top 10 weapon thing, and you could bring in guys to talk about how awesome daggers are right now, or something ridiculous like that. What I would like to hear is the dev saying, you know what, daggers are broken, or hey, we're sorry the barrage shoots through everything, and we just can't fix it, but we will someday. That's it. Short little thing like, hi, we know it's broken. We're gonna fix it. Maybe today, maybe never, maybe 6 months from now, but sorry. Or, this is awesome. Guess what? We're gonna have something awesome for you. We can't tell you, but it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be here in 2 months. Okay, cool.
I suspect by the end of this month, we're going to get some sort of substantial. I'm not saying a release date like, oh, by the way, next week open beta, but maybe a lockdown on open beta will be happening in March, or you know what I mean, or hey, by the way, we were holding out and we have this whole other system we're now going to add to the game. Have fun with it. I mean, but something's coming. Problem is, I know all eyes at SOE are now H1Z1. It's all about the zombies there, and I'm sure that's probably going to have an impact over the next week or so on the EverQuest and Landmark teams too.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, Dexella had tweeted out that she was doing, and she's not CM on Landmark anymore, but she still does a lot of the community and as more on the marketing side, a company-wide H1Z1 test. So there's definitely that. There's definitely using the resources of everybody to get stuff done as quickly as possible. And it's something I actually was talking to a couple of folks about. There isn't actually a dedicated PR individual for each of the different projects. It's a team that works on everything. So you're right that anything PR and media related for Landmark is probably on the back burner for right now with H1Z1. You're definitely correct about that. Dygz. Swizzle.
Dygz just added, I'm not going to repeat it on the show, but Dygz just added a new game to play every time H1Z1 is mentioned. Unfortunately, I'm not equipped to do this. I'll catch up after the show.
Well, only in Washington and California, or Colorado rather, right now anyway, so.
True.
Because, Twitch
see, if you're in Denver, that's all good.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, it may have played into why I possibly came to California,
Anyway, so PvP. Actually, one of the things that I thought was a little interesting with the equipment, there's some variations that seem pretty meaningful, and there's some variations that, there's items that are just straight up redundant. The bolstering guard, for example, the armor chest, the chest piece is different than the what's it called? The battle forge gear, the one that gives the charging bonuses.
Right.
But the helmet and the gloves are stat for stat exactly the same. I think they're even the same element.
Well, you have to remember also, without even disregarding what they might do with the changes in gear in the future, that we're also not getting the aesthetics for the helmet and the gloves and stuff right now.
Right.
So that I think that might actually become significant when you're actually going for a certain look, that people will be more interested in, this is going to look different in addition to hopefully seeing some other stats on the helmet and gloves that maybe they'll be developing sometime in the future. Again, that's all hypothetical, but there's a lot of people believing that we are going to see those pieces of gear become more meaningful someday in the future than they are right now.
Oh, I'm sure they will. I think they just are keeping it to the chest right now, so that way there's less variation and stuff that they have to balance and maintain, because every new keyword interaction that they add, or every keyword interaction that they add to a new category of item that didn't have it before, it basically adds another exponent to the amount of balancing that needs to be done for all of the equipment and all of the interactions between them. So it's definitely something that I'm sure they're easing into. But then the other thing about it, I feel like the actual variations of the stats and things are probably going to start coming a little bit more once we have the features to promote those attributes. The armor steel that you get from the bolstering guard or the battle forge, they, off of the helmet and off of the gloves, it's really helpful, and it definitely makes sense for both. The specificity, though, towards the bolstering, because it is 11 armor steel on the chest itself, it definitely seems like that profile of equipment is more specified for that armor, and that maybe down the road there'll be things where you get more armor or health or whatever off of successful charges with the Battleforge set. Oh, and that's another
Yeah.
thing, that there's not actual sets and set bonuses. I really appreciate that, because that'll lock people into stuff, and I hate that.
No, that's a good point. And hopefully they take that feedback and they make it so that you don't feel like you're stuck in just one set of gear. It's one of those things where, how are they going, again, it brings us back to how are they doing the combat differently in Landmark than they are in EQ Next? Because I think that a lot of people really want extra freedom in Landmark. They want to feel like they don't have to be like melded into the class system that they're giving people for EQ Next. But that means that those same combat developers who are making UI coding and combat system coding for EQ Next are also going to have to work and at the same time develop those systems for Landmark. So, is it worth having a different system now, or should we hopefully maybe get a system that's similar to what we have in EQ Next and hope that someday they change everything in Landmark? Because,
it's not going to be similar, because we have the freedom of using any weapon we want. They want us to use any armor that we want in Landmark, and we know that we're restricted by class for 2 weapon sets, and armor type is also restricted by the class that you're equipped with. So we already know there's going to be significant differences, and they've always said there's going to be significant differences because they want Landmark to be its own game.
Well, also the hotbar abilities, once we start to get those in Landmark, those are just things that you put on your hotbar and you're good to go. There's not going to be any, you have to be using this type of weapon to use these types of abilities. Or maybe there will. Maybe they will have some abilities that you can only use if you're using a one-handed sword or a two-handed sword or a sword and shield sword, something. Just because it's a thrust and it wouldn't really make sense with the staff, or a thrust with a bow really doesn't make any sense. That'd be quite hilarious. But that's definitely stuff that we'll know probably more about as they get further down the road and put those systems in and start to introduce them to us.
Well, and again, it goes back to the point where that 2 different systems requires double the work that it does to create one system. And so what you're asking is for Landmark to have its own unique, working, viable, fun. Really, it comes down to fun. No matter what PvP, PvE, whatever you want to, fun combat system. You're asking these devs to put a lot of work into it. At the same time, they're trying to create a fun combat system that's different from EQ Next. If it's different, if it's the same, what parts are going to be the same, what parts are going to be different. That's something that we just really don't know. We're guessing at it, but we don't really know because they never say anything.
Yeah.
Well, they've said some stuff, so we know some stuff. We know that there's going to be, they want less abilities on the weapons. We know that we aren't going to have character abilities. We are going to, things that are the same are keyword systems. So we know some stuff. But
Well, actually, not necessarily less abilities on the weapon. When I asked about it at SOE Live 2014 about the DCO model of combinations of left and right clicks to access your different abilities, they said, yes, definitely down the road, that's something that we're looking at and would like to try out as an option. So I think they are looking at things.
they aren't wanting 4 weapon abilities on the weapons. I don't think that's going to change.
No, actually, I think it would be not necessarily that left click, right click, and E are the 3 different abilities for the weapon, so much as left click, right click is slash back, and then thrust forward, which each have their own ranges and
different than
properties.
weapon abilities.
Yeah, and that's I guess maybe we're debating 2 different things here.
Yeah, that's more chaining animations. That's more chaining your strikes as opposed to it being,
To me, those are just different abilities, because if I can actually build my chain, build my combo, that I can drag and drop, like what 2 left clicks and a right click, what 3 left clicks and a right click, what left click, and then a click and hold before I go to the right click. What all those variations are going to be, how I access all of my different weapon-based attacks. It's a different set of ability modification. I really hope we do get that sort of thing too, because I could actually see that as something that the players can use as helping the the developers, helping the team with the basis for the different classes and some of the interactions in EverQuest Next. The idea that we can actually build the combos that like the warrior would be using in Landmark, so that way the warrior in EverQuest Next feels really awesome because it's based on the interactions that the players have designed. And it could be different, different things for different races, or different classes using the weapons differently, have different combinations. Yeah, I'm just kind of ranting here.
No, I mean you're right. And
What else is new?
But he has a really
live
good
feature
point.
rant.
Yeah,
There
it's
you
true.
go for it.
You are ranting, and that's the name of it. But I mean, there's a lot of conflicting information out there for what people are, and you have to keep in mind that things change. It's been 6 months since live, and sometimes things we don't really know where combat is right now. But something that you mentioned is that if people are creating something in Landmark that's supposed to carry over for Next, and the systems are very different, like very different, that's going to be difficult to create. I mean, if I would like to see what everybody wants, which is to give the builders total control. They want to have control of what kind of combat system they have in their claim, what people can do, so that you can carry over stuff from one game to the other. Because there's a lot of people who don't care about Next. They just want to have fun in Landmark, but there are people who do want to carry over. And if those people don't have that system to try it out and make it work, they may find that very difficult to do.
Yeah, the devs aren't planning to give us total control, for sure.
Not total control, but they want to give as much control as they can safely give to us. And what that control is will probably increase over time quite significantly.
Well, Terry said specifically that we aren't going to be able to design our own abilities. We're just going to, like if he said that we'll be able to modify the appearance of weapons, but we aren't going to be designing our own weapons and putting our own spells and abilities on those weapons. They want control over that. So there's stuff that they aren't planning to give up.
That's true.
Right now.
Yeah,
tell the builders, push on them. You gotta lean on them, Dygz. Be like, give me weapon control.
Yeah. I just poke Dave like, hey, I really want to remake that game Crusaders of Might and Magic you worked on at 3DO, but we just need like this feature and this feature and this feature. If you could give that to us, that'd be super cool. I totally want to make that game in Landmark.
Make sure he's 3 gin and tonics deep before you do that.
Good idea.
Come on, Dave. You promised, man. You promised.
He doesn't promise anything.
No, he doesn't. Right.
He knows better than that, even when he's drunk. Man, I don't think I've ever actually seen him like drunk. Yeah, a couple of drinks, yeah, but yeah.
People seem to say he was pretty far gone during the New Year's Eve party.
Oh no, he seemed like he was enjoying himself, but he was able to make all the linking and triggering stuff happen. Like he wasn't like slurring everything and just just walking around all sloppy in the game. So yeah, he wasn't that toasted, or if he was, he did a good job of hiding it. Oh man, combat's it's definitely from what we first saw, 3 weapons and your armor is associated with the weapon, and the only other thing you have is your heroic movement trinkets to make things absolutely ridiculous. Even going from that to where we're at right now was a huge significant jump, but compared to where things really need to be before getting into open beta, it's still just a small step.
Yeah, I mean, they've said it before. I mean, they say it in that intro video that you have to watch every time you reinstall the game. But open beta is pretty much launch for a game that's free to play like this. So what happens is regardless of how awesome building is right now, combat is very much an alpha. I mean, obviously, 2 seconds in the caves and you realize the monsters are very, very simple. And so, what happens is we love this game, so we're playing it no matter what. But the average player, you don't get a second chance. People get the game, they come, it's free to play, they download it, they check it out for a day, maybe 2 days, and if it's not fun, they'll move on. So they need to, before they bring it to open beta so that people are just coming in and checking it out and deciding whether or not this is fun for them, they do need to iron that out, and they need to make it so that the average person who jumps from MMO to MMO or from game to game is going to come in and actually have a really good time and say, hey, I like this, I want to stick around. So I think we have a little while before we see that. I hope we do, because I mean, I know for a fact most of my friends, if they were to come in and play the game right now, they would be like, okay, that was great, and they'd be moving on to something else.
Yeah, a lot of the systems are still a little bit too early to have all the appeal that they need. We have linking and triggering, but it still doesn't have all of the focus and features that it needs to be able to make an appeal to the redstone users and the heavy creators in Minecraft. Be like, hey, we've created a space where you can make all the amazing stuff, but instead of being like, super low fidelity 3D, it can be super beautiful, polished, well done 3D and, look awesome.
I know that's exactly. I have people who follow me on Twitter that I've been interacting with for a few years, and they tend to sit up and take notice when I start talking about a particular video game. Because they like my taste, we share the same, whatever it is. And when I started talking to Landmark, they definitely came and checked things out. And we're like, oh, well, it's a building game? I'm just going to go play in Minecraft, until I started saying, well, here's what players are actually doing with the tools they have in the game. When you show them screenshots of like the builds, the crazy stuff that people are able to do, they're pretty stunned. So I know there's going to be an interest, but I wonder how many of the Minecraft people are going to hate the limitations that Landmark does have as far as putting their presence out in the world. It's not a whole universe they get to control the way you do in Minecraft. It's a couple of plots of land you were able to claim in this shared world with other people. It's a very different thing for some people,
I think it'll also be counteracted by the whole, it's free to play? Oh, hell yes.
Oh, yeah, there'll be the land rush of the people like free to play game, and I'm sure we'll pick up some wonderful people from that, but the majority of it will be white noise for a couple of weeks while the game goes live and all of that, for sure.
Well, yeah, it's not that I'm worried about. It's the idea that over time, people who are playing the other games, it's like, oh boy, I finally got a new system. I can play something cooler than Minecraft. What's out there? Okay, so there's Landmark and My Dream and Block Story and Spark. Well, only if you have Windows 8. I still do not.
Right?
I'm skipping to 10, I guess.
Who hatched that brilliant idea?
Oh, their marketing department did a good job with that one. They made it a really easy decision for me to say, nope, not doing Project Spark for a bit.
Seriously.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going on with Project Spark. I'm not going to say that it's a bad thing, but it is a weird limit that you can only use it for was it either Xbox One or PC are the only two places where Windows 8 are the only places you can use it, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's Microsoft right now. They're a little bit crazy sauce.
It feels a little weird because it almost feels like the big push for the Xbox Live stuff and trying to get the indie developers and stuff involved with Xbox 360, and then they eventually abandoned that. XNA is fully abandoned and no longer supported, and it all just fizzled, really. They just kind of let it go. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if part of that was Project Spark, but anyway, that's a completely different subject. This is a long way out. But yeah, the idea that people will be able to come to Landmark once it's in open beta because it's free, no risk to get in. And I guess one of those advantages free-to-play games have, you play it and you're like, oh, dude, this sucks. This is not for me. Or, oh, man, my computer can't run this. We'll play something else and forget about it. Eventually, somebody else will remind them, hey, guess what? This game I've been playing, Landmark, it's pretty cool. You should check it out. You're like, Landmark? Didn't I play that? Okay, whatever. And then they play it with their friend, and it's amazing. And then they, spend $100 immediately. Or whatever. I don't know. Maybe not that one. Only if they want the storage space.
That is how the cash shop works, though. I mean, not to turn this into a conversation about that, but that's how the whole free-to-play cash shop design really does work, in that it gives a player essentially an unlimited run at the game without having to fork out the $50-$60. You know, the big mystery of, is this game worth $60, $50? And if they like the game, because I have done that, I am very cognitive of that with the games that I don't have to pay a monthly sub for, that when I do have expendable income, or when I have had expendable income, I'm happy to throw $10 in, $20 in, buy something. You know, I get something neat in game, or I get, you know, materials or whatever. In my case, like at Landmark, I bought some outfits because I was invested enough in the game that I'm so distracted by the chat about the Nagafin hat right now. It's not even funny. I was so invested in Landmark that I was like, you know, I like that outfit. $10 seems a bit high for an outfit. I think actually wasn't the Victorian outfit 15. It was expensive. It was expensive for what I. It was expensive for what I for virtual clothing, in my opinion. But I look cool in the game world, you know. So it was. I was happy to do that. I was happy to do that, and I've been happy to do it. EverQuest 2, I have definitely dropped plenty of money in the cash shop for convenience when I realized that I do like this game, and I know that dropping the $10 to buy a max capacity backpack right now is really going to be useful for me making my way through the world. Oh, you know what? Yes, I will drop $20 on an end game level speed mount so I can fly through the world. And you know what? Ironically, I've never regretted spending that money on those things in EverQuest 2. So, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the Vanu outfit was probably the best $10 I spent, because I also wanted to get into the voting on player submitted stuff for Player Studio. So yeah, but then since then I've probably spent at least that much on pockets and storage space. And by the way, I wanted to do a little pause and a shout out and a little drink here. Thank you very much for the host earlier there, Cody. You just wrapped up the show. Has another show that also starts after Landmark.
Oh, cool.
Live, and,
very nice.
Brought that party on over here. So cheers.
Very
to all
nice.
of you
Hello,
folks.
everybody.
All right. So, yeah, continuing on here. Well, I don't know. Was there anything else that you wanted to say on the subject, or anybody on that specific subject, or anything in particular that hasn't been brought up that you like? It's a really burning thing that you wanted to talk about this week.
Mounts. No. I'm kidding.
Flying mounts specifically, that's one of the big topics on the forums. No flying mounts ever.
Really? I
Flying,
figured they'd give us the
sparkly
flying mounts first.
Pony mounts with rainbow manes.
Yeah.
I think in the case of, because it has broken games, you know, when you give player the ability to get up in the sky, look over everything, I know it's happened. It's happened for me in EverQuest 2. I'm not at a level where I play a fake character, but I'm not high enough yet to actually fly with her wings. I still have to take public transit. And there have been times where you're on a public transit thing and you get that aerial view of everything. It does kind of ruin the mystique of how big the world is when you're able to just look down on it and see it, you know, in one shot. I guess that's why some people don't like that idea. If the game's built from the ground up to be viewed that way, it's a different thing. In Landmark's case, probably because of the voxel stuff and because of, you know, they're still, from what I understand, trying to work around things getting caught on things. I suspect flying mounts will probably come to Landmark before ground-based mounts. But I'm sure Nero's going to tell me why I'm wrong right now.
Actually, what I was going to say is we don't really need mounts to fly right now. Boots of the Zephyr and the sword, you can literally charge
good point,
2 times
good point.
up, wait for your stamina to recharge, charge 2 times up, wait for your stamina to recharge, and eventually you will be at the top of the skybox. And it doesn't really feel like it breaks the game all that much. Now, I could definitely see there being grades to it where there's up to 300 meters altitude is where you can fly fighters and combat planes. and then maybe from 300 to 500 is restricted for things that have a unit that's a very specific size that has to be in it. That basically makes it a commercial ship or whatever that's actually allowed to ascend up above to a higher level, but it's still not able to go all the way up to the skybox. So there's still some of that mystique to it. And I think the skybox is something that's probably going to get adjusted at some point. Right now, when you get high enough, even on the mountains that already exist in the game, it starts to flatten out. And I'm pretty sure the plan is to have more dynamic, volumetric, responsive weather later down the road, probably leveraging some of what they're doing in H1Z1 and pulling that into Landmark later on. So I really think that the ability to have not just flying mounts, but full on ship to ship combat in the air is definitely something that will be possible in Landmark. In fact, I think that's something that would want to emphasize, because if you're fighting 200 meters above all of the voxel buildings and stuff, those things are basically way low level of detail and not really an impact. And likewise, you jerks flying around up there fighting are also low level of detail to the people on the ground. So, they'll see an explosion here and there, and it's not that big of a deal. And maybe the debris will rain down. And that's the thing I do really hope we see, because that's one of my favorite things in PlanetSide 2. When a plane gets taken down and that debris comes smashing down, because the debris in PlanetSide 2 unfortunately has this weird thing where it's like got super gravity to it. So it pulls straight down, and anything it lands on, it just crushes.
This, by the way, is why we'll never have flying cars in real life.
Yeah. It's a good reason.
Not to mention just, throwing your empty Coke bottle out and your McDonald's paper bags out the window. This is why debris is why we're not going to have flying cars in real life.
Yeah. Very good point. It would not be safe. Frigo's death ray. Yeah, that's way up in the sky, too. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, they could definitely have it. There's something cool about flying for the first time in a game. I mean, I agree with what he was saying, that it ruins the things, but they can have certain areas where you can fly and certain where you can't, and it's just like that whole feeling of how it changes your perspective. It's kind of awesome. And then when there's something up there that's going to kill you, it's even cooler.
Yeah. I mean, that.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, when we actually have floating islands and stuff, when we actually have a reason to be up in the air that high, that'll also add a lot more of an appeal to that, because then you could actually have, potentially you've claimed one of those floating islands and you've set up a fortress on it, and that's an entire PvP encounter that you and your buddies have created, is that random people can just fly up and contest it, and you just get in your cannons and try to shoot them down.
Lots of fun.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there needs to be a big giant sky dragon that comes along and eats us in Landmark. Just
so cool. I don't know if you guys ever played Darkfall, but that was one of the best moments I've had in gaming in a long time. The first time you're just wandering around and all of a sudden the whole ground lights up around you and this giant creature is chasing you down. You're running for your life. So it's definitely one of those things that get your heart pounding. You're like, oh, I'm going to die. Or back in Wuoshi, back in EverQuest, Kunark.
That's pretty funny. And that, I'm sure they will add limited, like, raid-sized bosses here and there. Maybe one every island a week or something like that. So
for Landmark?
Yeah, for Landmark. It could be smaller things,
I hope
could
so.
be bigger things.
I mean, either that or, they run events that way, I mean, it's an idea. Do you think that's something they want to do, though? Or, I mean,
yeah.
I really get the impression is that they wanted to give the players the tool and not have to do anything like that.
I think it'll be something that they'll want to do as a test of their own systems and tools. Give a Slaug a crown and see what kind of an empire he can build, and how big it gets before players can wipe it out, or how big it can get if it gets to the point where it's threatening players' claims and territories. That would be really cool.
I think they'll do that in EQ Next instead of Landmark. Yeah.
Who knows?
It's
really,
tough,
who knows?
it's tough to say because it's, if Landmark is going to be the testing ground for a lot of these systems.
It's not the testing ground. It's only the testing ground in the systems that are shared. It's not a thing where they're just throwing stuff into Landmark to test for EQ Next. It's the stuff that is in Landmark that's like EQ Next is being tested first because Landmark is releasing early. They aren't just throwing stuff into Landmark as a testing ground for EQ Next.
You sure? Because it really feels like that's exactly what they just did.
What's what?
I'm pretty sure they just threw a bunch of mobs at us. That feels like a testing ground to me.
I mean, there's just mobs because there's going to be mobs, but they're not EQ Next mobs.
The Wisps seem like they are.
Are they? Do we know that? I mean, it feels like they just threw us a bunch of stuff to test and said, "Here's a bunch of monsters. Tell us how it goes."
Yeah, they did.
I don't know.
But they're not EQ Next ones.
Well,
Yeah, no, and I think that as the game goes on, we're going to see even, I'm sure eventually robot overlords will turn up. I'm sure, Pop-Tart Cat will show up, or you know what I mean? Like, there's going to be more variety added to the mix as the game moves on, I am sure. Yeah, no, I don't. What I've seen and watched people playing and all of the stuff with the mobs they've added to the game, the Wisp, yeah, granted, it certainly seems something that you'd see in EverQuest 2 or EverQuest, no doubt about it, or any fantasy game for that matter. But the Feed Me Seymour thing, the Chomper, that doesn't strike me. Like the other things don't really strike me as EverQuest per se.
really, Piranha Plants?
Yeah,
don't
really.
seem like they
Surprised if
belong.
we don't see all those things. Yeah, I'd be shocked if we don't see every single one of those monsters we have right now in EverQuest, because none of them are sci-fi. They're all fantasy.
Yeah, because fantasy is one of the genres that we can do in Landmark, but that doesn't mean it's
Right, but-
EQ Next specific.
Actually, now that I think about it, Chompers totally seem like they belong in Fearot. 100%.
I mean, the thing is, they can reskin the monsters from Next and throw them into Landmark. You can take a Chomper and you can just change, the way it is and turn it into something totally sci-fi. That instead of spitting goo at you, it's shooting laser fire at you or something, and it could be some sort of, just you don't have to actually create a different monster. You can just change the way the monster looks and make it sci-fi, and that's, I think, what we're going to see a lot of in the future when they talk about making it genre agnostic.
I am curious. Well, let's turn this around. I'm not being antagonizing about this, but I am curious. What would you have liked to have seen instead?
Well, I mean, as far as like
As far as mob
monsters and
design. Yeah, as far as mob design.
no,
what was it
I-
you were looking for?
I wasn't really looking for anything. I completely understand what they did. I'd go back to referring to my music box analogy that I made earlier, where we're basically, they took the pieces and they gave us the pieces, and I think that we are seeing a lot of that stuff. I'm not expecting stuff that's really unique to Landmark. I mean, a lot of people are waiting for laser guns, but you could take a weapon that's totally EQ Next and reskin it into a laser pistol. Because what's the difference between a wand and a laser pistol? The way your character holds it? We can have a wand that does something, and the laser pistol does the exact same things as the wand, except for in Landmark, it's awesome and it's sci-fi, and your space cowboy can be running around with his double-barrel six-shooters, but, in EQ Next, it does something totally different.
Here's the idea, though. I think correct me if I'm wrong. I know Dygz has really been watching development for a very long time, too. He's been hyper-invested. The game did originally, there's been mixing of the message, and it has changed over time. And I think they realized trying to build this with EverQuest Next may have been a mistake, and that's why they backed off from trying to do that. But it's one of those things of they kind of had to do it, because how else are you going to get people invested in what Landmark's about? You know what I mean? But I think the game originally did start with a fairly heavy fantasy bias. And as the game is as we've gone through closed beta, and there's been a clear indication that people are really liking, the variety. I think they may have been as surprised by that as, a lot of people are. And so once they realized there was a need for sci-fi props, things like that, they started throwing them at us. So maybe this really is just a case of, here's what we started with, this is what's been in the pipeline, and by the time we realize people want like robot turret sentries that'll walk around or something, that stuff takes time to get into the pipeline and put into the game with AI and with things behind it,
Yeah. And one of the things I'm pretty sure about is why we don't have a lot of the Planet Side 2 or really any of the Planet Side 2 stuff in the game right now. All of it doesn't really fit EverQuest Next. It's all too clean, too photorealistic, not this kind of softer, almost cartoony, not Disney style, but a little. It's
the
not
expressive anime style faces that they're moving toward, so that we can see.
But
I kind
just
of agree with you like that. Yeah, it has a different aesthetic,
and it's just as much like the character models, and I'm sure the models have a completely different skeleton and rigging, and that's why they couldn't just give us the armors from PlanetSide 2 one for one, because it's a completely different system. But beyond that, probably using different lighting, different shaders, different textures and stuff. Not only would it be the addition of all of those to add the items from PlanetSide 2 into Landmark successfully, but it would also be a matter of having to kind of soften them and make them actually fit the world. Because, like I said, they're a little bit too hard and photorealistic for the spectrum of Landmark. That doesn't mean they couldn't put them in. It wouldn't look pretty close, but I think they probably want to do their own sci-fi aesthetic for Landmark that's, maybe themed on PlanetSide 1 and 2, but not a direct copy. That's my guess. Otherwise, I figured they would have put the PlanetSide 2 assets in a while ago. One other thing,
I don't think they're going for PlanetSide 2 anything with Landmark, but
yeah,
sci-fi, but they're not doing anything that specific.
I hope they pull from all their games. I hope they take all the best from their gigantic armada of MMO games they've been making over the last decade and put the best of all of them into EverQuest Next and into Landmark, because they have so much to pull from. They have so much. Usually when you start talking about a game and you mention something to a dev, you have to be careful that you're not really saying, hey, you should make your game like this other game that some other company made. You can say, hey, I really liked your follower system in EverQuest 2, where you could go out and meet somebody and hire them, and they could follow you around, and they'd have little scripts and stuff. That was cool. Maybe you could do that and then expand on that and make it even more interactive. But you can take stuff that they've already done and said, hey, this was so cool in that game. Do you think maybe you might do that for Landmark?
They're doing that with features. I'm talking about they're not doing that with the specific details of the themes. It's connected to EQ Next, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of PlanetSide themes visually in Landmark.
There's no reason they couldn't do it if they didn't want to, right? Why not?
I don't think they want to. That's my point.
Which once again kind of goes back to the point of genre agnostic, yeah, but we're mostly seeing EverQuest Next assets coming in.
Well, they always start with fantasy first and then move towards sci-fi.
Well, it did start as EverQuest Next Landmark, so there's also that they did plan for the big fantasy and the tie-in there, and
yeah, that's just it. Like I said, the messaging changed. Like I said, they had to in order to, I think, get people interested in Landmark in a way, and they thought it was going to be more crossover, so to speak. But yeah, it's definitely. I forgot it was called EverQuest Landmark originally. So yeah,
Well, they started. Even the alpha packs start with. We do get one techie thing. We get tiny bits of sci-fi, but it's heavily slanted towards fantasy, with a little bit of sci-fi, and it has been all the way through from day one that we've jumped in. So I'm not surprised that they would start with fantasy mobs. But I'm still waiting for steampunk, more steampunk actually. But we'll see.
I was just thinking of that steampunk. No wonder we live together. I was just thinking about steampunk. That there needs to be more steampunk in the game too. I'm sure more variety is coming down the road. They got to start with something,
Are they doing gnomes for EverQuest Next? Because if they did, you'd see so much of that in Landmark the day they decided to do a steampunk build for.
I'm sure gnomes are coming. Nero, are gnomes announced for launch?
One of the starting 8 that I can
Okay, that so definitely, I'm sure something that'll be added to the game, but not at launch. Yeah.
that's
I
something
can see people upset about that.
I don't know if they're, not necessarily there will be a playable race, but they'll probably still exist in the game. They'll probably have, a build contest.
Oh,
even if
totally,
we can't play 'em.
totally.
But I'm also wondering how much of it, like, how much blurring the lines between dwarves and gnomes they're going to do for this one. If dwarves are going to be specifically the mining and smithing, and gnomes are more like the specific tinkering types, or if there's going to be some crossover between the two, and maybe dwarves are more mechanical tinkerers versus gnomes are more magical tinkerers. And if that's the case, then dwarves would be more of the steampunk alternative.
I hope they don't combine them. It was really cool to have the different feel. I mean, the gnome cities felt so much different than they did than the dwarven ones in both EQ1 and EQ2, and I almost feel like that's part of EverQuest. That I would be very sad if they just sort of phased out gnomes and been like, nope, it's dwarves now.
Yeah, because I know gnomes were in at launch for 2. Dygz, were gnomes in at launch for 1?
Yes.
Gotcha. He's saying yeah. All right. So yeah, it would be an interesting. Well, see, now here we are. We're talking about next. That would be an interesting decision. Take away I know gnomes aren't super popular. They're not the most played race in the game. Same thing with Fae. I don't think Fae are the most popular race in the game, but I really enjoy playing. What?
Gnomes at least have the thing that it always comes after the word punting, so they never have that going for them very well.
I think a lot of that also came from the gnome hate, quote unquote, actually really stemmed from World of Warcraft more than anything else.
Well, it's because they're not really gnomes; they're treasure trolls in World of Warcraft.
Good point.
Well, Faye won the small race poll, right?
Yeah,
I believe they did. So definitely, they're the more popular of these small races for sure because they're awesome, and that's why.
They make the most sense as a playable race to me because they come built in with the advantage of flight. While they don't have the ability to stand toe-to-toe the same way potentially as others, the ability to use that mobility and get to places other people can't get as a utility, as a combat or a defensive sort of thing.
That's very much, truth be told, it is one of the reasons why I've enjoyed playing in EverQuest 2, a Fae, for a long time. You can just glide longer and further, and you're able to kind of travel the world in a way that other players aren't. It's very cool, to be honest with you. But, people are correcting me in the chat room. They're pointing out that I know there's always there is a segment of diehards that love the small races like gnomes, but I'm sure that we would find out like Dark Elf is clearly the most popular race with people, or humans. I mean, it was a problem with Star Wars Galaxies.
Drizzt to Erden is the most popular race.
For all the variety that they had in races in Star Wars, the most popular race was human played. Why? Because at the end of the day, because of the way the art assets worked on your character, the only way you could guarantee that armor would always look badass on you is if you rolled a human. Because, Zabraks could wear human helmets because they only just had the horns, but a hammerhead, any of the other more, Rhodians, they'd put on the same armor and it would look retarded, So often, I'm sure, basic human is the way people go because, everything tends to look okay on them. But yeah, we're not going to. We're off on tangent here because we're not even going to see anything more than human for quite some time in Landmark.
Large human.
Large human. Oh boy.
They need those races in Landmark, man. They need large humans, small humans. It's just silly. I think that if they've got the races, people are going to want them in Landmark. I mean, could you imagine if you got to play, you like to be a Karen or you like to be a dwarf? Oh God, could you imagine telling Brass that they have dwarves in Next, but you can't be one in Landmark? I'd like to see.
I'm sure they already had special meetings. They had to pull Brass into an office and explain to her. Here's why you can't play a dwarf in Landmark. We're sorry.
You can imagine the screams coming out of that office from the other room. Why? What?
Well, they're holding
Exactly.
off on EQ Next races until they have them in EQ Next. They've said specifically that they want us to be excited. They want there to be a reason for us to be excited about playing EverQuest Next and playing the races in EverQuest Next, not, you know, yeah, I can already do this in Landmark. Why
That
do
makes
I don't
sense.
need to go over to
That makes
EQ?
sense.
I'm wanting aliens, though. I want some landmark aliens that we never see in EverQuest Next. That's what I'm waiting for.
I agree.
Yes.
We definitely need. I mean, again, and I'm not gonna let the sidebar too far, but I personally think that there's a real missed opportunity on SOE's part by not doing a proper space MMO out there. So, like I said, was hoping that what what eventually was announced H1Z1. I was hoping it was going to be an original sci-fi property for them that isn't PlanetSide. I mean, a proper full MMO, with RPG elements. But no, we're all getting zombies. So Aliens and Landmark would be great.
Well, that's actually something that I've been saying on both live and Dead Feature Rant, is the idea that a lot of Star Wars Galaxies fans did think that H1Z1 was going to be the game that Smedley kind of said it was going to be, and turned out to be...
Smedley was like, "Hey, Star Wars Galaxy fans, you're going to be able to come home." And
What he
and then
meant to say is, "Hey,
he had to, yeah,
Star Wars Galaxies
the open
fans.
world building, the open world building element that, not the other elements that we all love so dearly." And I took him to task. I was nice about it, but I said to him, "Listen, man, I mean no disrespect, but as a Star Wars Galaxies veteran, H1Z1 is not in any way going to fill that hole in my heart left behind by that game. So
Nope.
let's not even play." And he did publicly apologize. Like, "I'm sorry. I keep doing that too often. I'm really sorry." So,
He does. But hey, that's Smed. He's a pioneer, and sometimes he says things that the PR team winces at.
And I'll bring it up because we're talking about him. He went way out of his way to admit the mistake and apologize publicly to what happened with Star Wars Galaxies and the changeover and all of that. He addressed it in an AMA a year or so ago, and I was one of those butthurt fans, and I appreciated that he came around and really ate crow and apologized and explained the situation and did what he did at that. So, yeah, hey, I like Smed. I'll roll with it. But I think he's learned to stop comparing things to Star Wars Galaxies unless he's handing me another sci-fi MMO.
And that's something that I've been talking about on both shows, is that, yes, Landmark definitely can become the basis for making a new sci-fi MMO if we can make the aesthetic, if we can make the interactions, if we can make enough of the stuff that they could basically take it and, with our assistance, make an entire island continent or multiple of them that are fully populated, have full content going all the way through, have its own unique, crafting and other things, which may or may not be something they have to help us with and add new systems for, or adjust some systems for. They've said they want to support us in our ability to make a new game, and if we make a game that's awesome enough, they'll do everything they can to support it and help it be something that everybody gets a piece of, that it isn't just, SOE reaping the rewards, but everybody gets a chance to, actually have it be a real job, a real thing for them. Now, whether or not that's just Dave being super, super, super excited and, the idea for the project versus the reality of it, I don't know, but I'm really hoping that they are going to be doing that, because I talked to him over the break a little bit, and Dave is pretty happy with the idea of the player-generated content being the thing that SOE is mostly supporting. They're, still making content and updates and stuff along the way, but it's mostly like, let's get players onto this island that's, totally by Bay people and has, it's 20 to 100 hours of content just for the content, in case you don't want to go back and play through everything multiple times, or do different branching quest lines in different ways, or whatever it would be. I'm really excited for that, and I believe they do want Landmark to be the place where we do make a game that will eventually fill the need that Star Wars Galaxies kind of left for a lot of people.
No, until it's a proper sci-fi MMO where I can hold a plasma sword and roll a character that's an entertainer, they've got a long way to go. With that said, we've got about 9 minutes to wrap it up.
Yep, good point, good point. So, was there any last thoughts or anything that anybody wanted to say before we start wrapping up here? Because we talked about a lot of stuff.
I was wondering what you two have as your favorite build so far, armor and weapon-wise.
Oh, that's easy. Give me the staff with water-specific trinkets and the solar equipment, the solar chest, helmet, and gloves. And then I drink the light potion, and then I use a greater light stone, and then I use a lesser light stone. So my light radius of 75 further amplifies the damage boost I get off of my solar set, while at the same time allowing me to bring the light of God with me everywhere, because a 75 light radius is huge. It's gigantic. It is. You literally are a beacon of light underground using that setup.
What's it doing for your damage?
Every second I can do an extra like 15 or 20 or whatever damage. It's not a lot, but that combining with all the other stuff that the staff can do, because those left clicks, when they hit, they emanate in the area, they do extra damage, so it already has a DOT built into it, essentially. The only things that really seem immune to it are abominations, which slowly retreating are apparently moving fast enough to get out of the shot. For most things, it just destroys them, though. And then I guess if I've got a bunch of Slaugs on me, I'll switch to the Dark Steel and just use that to handle them, because it really does tank things pretty well. How about you, Danny?
Everything's so broken right now. Even the set you're talking about, the solar chest, it's not giving you the damage from the light. It's not giving the light bonus from the chest, so you're also losing out on the damage that you're supposed to get. So it should be doing more damage than it's actually doing. But everything is broken right now. I mean, there's a lot of kits that when you get armor bugged from zoning or from just teleporting through the world to go to another layer, you end up with double stats. And so sometimes things that do more damage with the more mana you have, that's going to do more damage with that. You're going to see those things stacking up. Some players are stacking double sets of chest pieces so you can get the bonus from both pieces of chest. So, you start getting crazy where, you get like your crit from like a regular, like a solar chest, like what you're talking about. Then you stick a Slayer's chest in your additional slot. So when you're at full health, you get an extra 200% crit, like not 200%, but 200 crit, which is just amazing. So if you're shooting stuff with a bow and you don't ever take health damage, you just melt mobs. So there's people doing stuff that sometimes they don't even do it intentionally. They're just like, hey, this looks cool. I like the way my character looks like this, but I want the stats from that. And all of a sudden you're like armor bugged and you're running massive crit and you have all this, all this health, all this mana, and it's just, that's another thing that plays in when you're mana bugged. You have twice as much mana. I mean, some builds are just amazing because like the wand. If you don't run out of mana with that and you can just spam it over and over and over again, you can just dominate, whether it's mobs or players, it doesn't matter. But for PvE, something with one of those kind of bugged out builds in the bow is just great. PvP right now, it's really hard to beat the broken restoration chest. It's not working right. You're supposed to get a cooldown on the ability to recover your shields by using it, the armor of restoration, and the way it's working right now is there's no cooldown, so your dots tick with the daggers and you're just constantly regenerating shields. It's very hard to kill a player like that. So I mean, that's when we talk about combat, like, is this should we be doing this? They told us to bug it out, they told us to play like that, so we're doing it. But
obviously that's not an intended side effect, although I am curious, how does that get past them without getting noticed? Because I would think the armor stacking and that would come up in the game.
It's not balanced. They haven't balanced
reported
anything. They just have thrown a bunch of stuff and are trying to close the gameplay loop. So they haven't really balanced combat yet. You didn't answer my question though. What's your favorite?
What's my favorite? I
You gotta have a favorite.
The bow. I enjoy a good build with the bow. I like actually. I will get in range of the creatures and the players who are shooting at me because I feel it's very gratifying when you hit your target. I love shooting at, even if it's PvE, I like shooting at the Slavs because they move around a little bit. And it's just that when you make a good shot, it feels gratifying. It feels good, like, that looked cool and it felt cool. So my favorite is anything with the bow, just because I enjoy the gameplay of shooting at things right now in the game. It's fun.
I've been using the bow mostly, and then I finally got solar gear and added a voltaic helm to that, and it bumped my my damage up quite a bit. So solar gear with a voltaic helm and a bow is kind of my favorite right now.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
Very cool.
And you? We're still missing one.
Because he's not playing.
I'm currently not playing
not
right
playing?
now. I don't have a gaming machine that died. Yeah, if you've been watching Live Feature Rant, you know I haven't been playing for 2 months.
Yeah.
So I
I'm
live
sorry.
vicariously through everybody's live streams, which is why I was like hanging out watching you a couple weeks ago and all of that. So
Oh,
yeah,
thanks.
I look forward to the good news I got tonight indicates I will most likely be back to not just part-time employed but gainfully employed. So getting into a new gaming PC is in the near future. So I will be able to weigh in heavily on the nuts and bolts of this sometime this year, I promise.
Oh, looking forward to it.
All right. So it is time to wrap up, everybody. Let's go one little round here so everybody can get a chance to let everyone know what you're all about. So, starting off with you, Danny, the weapons guy from Coffee Tea and PvP, correct?
Right. Well, I mean, it's CoffeeTeaPVP is just my branding right now, but I'm a streamer also. I stream PvP, which is a tough market in Landmark right now. But I'm on every Sunday through Thursday night at around this time, 10 p.m. Eastern, and I stream till pretty late at night. So if you're into it, if you thought about checking it out, I will figuratively hold your hand in game. I will help you get geared, and we'll help you. We'll help you learn the ropes if you kind of feel like playing around with us. Just let us know, and we'll try to help you have fun.
Very cool. Dygz, how about you?
I spend most of my time in the forums, but now that we've got PvE in the game, I've been playing quite a bit of PvE, and I think my favorite thing the last week or so has actually been the loot cave, just because people are so cooperative there. And seeing a bunch of people from the forums in the games has been a lot of fun. And tweeting my stuff out. I've got some fun pictures out that I put out. But yeah, I can't imagine what they're going to give us in this next update, and I'd really, really, really like to see the blueprint updated as soon as possible, but I'm sure Dave is busy.
The loot cave. Adam, how about you?
I'm in SoCal, baby.
Yeah.
This has been the strangest, most surreal week of my life. I should have done this years ago, is what I've been feeling all week. It is, my whole life has been chaotic. I'm glad that I was able to get in on the show and have some normalcy tonight, yeah. I'm in California, baby. Other than that, hey, if you want to help, looks like there's good news around the corner. I don't want to jinx it. But if you want to help keep Adam on his feet for the next couple of weeks, you can head over to GoFundMe.com/AdamBed and throw a couple bucks in the pot. That helps. But otherwise, hey, just follow me on Twitter and keep an eye out. I'm sure there's going to be some new stuff coming in the next few months.
Yep, absolutely. And on that, it is time to wrap up. We are going to go to Rockanan. I do not know this person. I have never seen. They're calling it EverQuest Landmark, so I think they might have kind of maybe not gotten the memo on, Landmark not being EverQuest next Landmark. So we can definitely go over there and inform them. So I will see you all over there. Thank you very much for coming, and have a good night.
Bye.